What happens when one of Hollywood's most iconic tough guys goes head-to-head with late night's most smug host? Tonight, we unpack the jaw-dropping clash that had everyone buzzing. When Clint Eastwood stepped onto Jimmy Kimmel's stage, things didn't just go off script, they exploded. This wasn't your average celebrity interview gone awkward. It was a front-row seat to what happens when raw authenticity collides with showbiz arrogance. And believe me, the ending will leave you stunned. Don't forget to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story only gets more intense. The energy on The Tonight Show set was as high as ever when Clint Eastwood appeared. At 94, he still had the kind of presence that could silence a room, like a gunslinger stepping into a dusty saloon. The crowd cheered wildly, thrilled to witness a living legend in the flesh. Yet something about the vibe felt off. Maybe it was Kimmel's grin, just a bit too polished. Or maybe it was the way his monologue had already taken cheap shots at aging. Hollywood icons. Eastwood eased into his seat with that slow, deliberate grace that makes even silence feel powerful. He adjusted his jacket, locked eyes with Kimmel, and gave a single, steady nod, the kind that says, "I'm ready for whatever you've got." "Clint Eastwood, everyone," Kimmel beamed, his trademark sing-song tone setting a sarcastic undertone. "Thanks for coming. I gotta say, you're looking great for your age." Laughter echoed from the audience, but Eastwood's expression didn't budge. "Well, I'm still breathing." "That's something," he said plainly. "That's more than we can say for some of your characters." Kimmel replied, clearly amused with himself. Then came the curveball. "Speaking of which, you've been pretty quiet on politics lately. Not like the old days when you were talking to empty chairs." That jab, referencing Eastwood's infamous Republican National Convention speech, landed with a thud. The air thickened. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably. Eastwood leaned back, his gaze sharpening. "I figured I'd leave the empty chair, talk to the professionals," he said, his gravelly voice cool and controlled. "Though I have noticed you've gotten really good at talking to yourself." A few nervous chuckles floated through the room. Kimmel's grin faltered, but he pushed ahead. "Well, hey, that's what they pay me for. But really, don't you think it's time for your generation to step aside? Let younger voices take over? Hollywood's changing. Maybe it's time some of those old-school attitudes did too." Eastwood didn't flinch. His stillness was unnerving, the kind that made it clear this wasn't some kindly grandpa playing along. This was a seasoned veteran weighing every word. "You know, Jimmy," he began, voice low but commanding, "I've been making movies longer than you've been alive. I've worked with legends, Leone, Streep directed Oscar-winning films, and created stories people still quote after 4 decades. So when you talk about stepping aside, I have to ask, what exactly have you done to earn the right to say that?" The studio went dead quiet. This wasn't playful sparring anymore. Kimmel's face flushed, but he tried to hold his ground. "Well, I do host a pretty successful talk show," he said with a tight smile. "We've won a few awards. Millions watch us." "Congratulations," Eastwood replied, his tone laced with disdain. "You've perfected the art of reading other people's jokes while interviewing folks far more talented than yourself." Quite the accomplishment. The tension in the room thickened. Behind the scenes, producers were probably breaking into cold sweats. Still, Kimmel kept going, wounded pride pushing him forward. "You know what, Clint? That kind of attitude is exactly the problem. This whole tough guy, better than everyone act, don't you think it's a little played out? The world's different now. People want honesty. Not some cowboy routine from the 70s. Eastwood's jaw barely moved, but something shifted in his posture, a warning like the wind before a storm. When he spoke, it was quieter, and somehow even more chilling. "Cowboy routine?" he repeated slowly. "Kid, I've been shot. At with real bullets, not Twitter insults. I've worked 16-hour days in desert heat to make films that mattered. I've created jobs, built careers, told stories that move people. You sit behind a desk making jokes about people who actually do the work. So yeah, tell me again about authenticity." Kimmel looked rattled. His usual cleverness deserted him. The audience sat frozen, watching a slow-motion collision between ego and experience. Look, Kimmel tried. I'm just saying maybe it's time Hollywood admits things have changed. The industry's evolving. Maybe it's time the old guard stopped clinging to outdated values. We can't keep glorifying toxic masculinity. Masculine toxicity? Eastwood cut in, voice like a blade. Is that what we're calling it now, when a man actually does his job? When he owns up to his responsibilities? When he doesn't tear others down to feel better about himself? A beat of pure silence followed. The room felt like it stopped. Breathing. Kimmel seemed desperate to change the tone, but Eastwood wasn't finished. You wanted to talk about how entertainment's evolved? Eastwood continued, tone razor sharp. Let's talk. It used to be you needed talent to make it. You had to sing, act, tell stories worth listening to. Now, you can make a career out of reading tweets and mugging for the camera. That's not progress, that's regression. Kimmel's face turned redder by the second. The man who usually dominated every conversation was now fighting for footing. But instead of diffusing the tension, he made the mistake that ended any hope of redemption. You know what, Clint? I think you're just bitter. Bitter that Hollywood left you behind. When's the last time you made a movie someone under 30 actually watched? Maybe instead of lecturing me about talent, you should worry about staying relevant in an industry that's clearly moved on. The words hung heavy, like the smoke after a gunshot. Even the camera crew looked stunned. Eastwood didn't speak right away. He simply stared, those piercing, pale eyes carrying the weight of decades and the power to silence anyone with a glance. And when he finally spoke, Clint Eastwood's voice was barely audible as he leaned in and said, "Pass me by." The crowd quieted, straining to hear. Jimmy, my last film made over $200 million and got 6 Oscar nominations. Meanwhile, your show pulls in 2 million viewers on a good night. My movies? They're still being watched, still talked about. When Kimmel tried to cut in, Eastwood silenced him with one commanding finger. I'm not done. I've been in this business for over 50 years. I didn't chase trends. I made what mattered. You, though? You say what executives want you to? Say you think what they want you to think. So when you talk about authenticity, it's like a puppet lecturing a master craftsman. The room fell silent. Kimmel looked shaken but defensive. You come from a different era, Clint, an era with real problem sexism, racism, the boys' club culture. Maybe some of that needed to be left behind. Eastwood's jaw tightened. I've worked with the strongest women in this industry. I've hired them, directed them to Oscars, fought to make films no studio would touch. What have you done? Besides turning them into punchlines? Kimmel stammered, caught off guard. But Eastwood didn't let up. I've told stories about all kinds of people long before it was trendy. Meanwhile, you sit here mocking anyone who doesn't look or think like you, and you call that progress. The studio was frozen. Even the crew had stopped moving. You've never built anything on your own, Eastwood continued. Never taken a real risk. You're a middleman with a team of writers behind you. So when you lecture me about being outdated, it's like a karaoke singer mocking Sinatra. Kimmel shot back, I work hard. I care about this job. Eastwood scoffed, hard work? Try getting up before dawn for a perfect shot. Try doing 10 takes while your body's screaming. You read cue cards and react to applause signs. That's not hard work, it's glorified babysitting. The audience shifted uneasily. This wasn't a regular late-night segment anymore. You know what's truly outdated? Eastwood went on. Tearing people down to feel big. Acting like cynicism equals intelligence. That's not insight, it's laziness wearing a suit. Kimmel made one last attempt to steer the show back. Come on, Clint. People tune in to laugh, not to hear some angry old man rant. Eastwood's expression darkened. Angry old man? His voice dropped. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. You could use this show to spotlight real accomplishments, to inspire people. But instead you mock, belittle, and tear others down. That's not entertainment, Jimmy. That's just sad. The word sad hit like a hammer. Kimmel's face went pale, but instead of backing down, he snapped. You're just clinging to the past, Clint, that tough guy act? It's toxic masculinity. In a cowboy hat, the room went dead quiet. Eastwood didn't flinch. He stood up slowly, eyes locked on Kimmel. "Stand up, Jimmy," he said, almost in a whisper, but it rang louder than any shout. "If you're going to speak to me like that, you do it on your feet, like a man." The audience was stunned. This wasn't a late-night comedy segment anymore. It had turned into something raw and real. Jimmy Kimmel looked around for help, but none came. "Clint, maybe we should just stand up," he said, his voice firmer this time, signaling the moment was slipping from his control. He rose from his seat, and standing next to Clint Eastwood only made the contrast more jarring. Eastwood, despite his age, stood tall and unshaken. Kimmel, by comparison, looked like a performer unprepared for a real confrontation. "You want to talk about toxic masculinity?" Eastwood said, stepping closer. "Toxic is hiding behind jokes because you're too scared to stand for something real. It's mocking people who actually achieve things while doing nothing yourself." Kimmel tried to interject, but Eastwood's raised hand silenced him completely. "You sit behind this desk every night," Clint continued, "and tear people down, athletes, actors, politicians, anyone brave enough to try. You mock their failures and diminish their wins, but you've never risked anything, never stood for something, never failed at something that mattered." The room was deathly quiet. Even the audience held their breath. Kimmel, usually sharp-tongued and clever, looked lost, desperate. Eastwood's voice only grew stronger. "Real masculinity is about responsibility, respect, and building something worth protecting, not making the vulnerable the punchline of your jokes." Kimmel, shaky, tried to regain control. "This is my show, Clint. You can't just what?" Clint interrupted. "Speak the truth? Call out a bully?" His tone sharpened. "Everything that happens here, every cruel joke, every cheap shot, it's all on you," murmurs began in the audience. But it wasn't laughter or applause, it was discomfort. People were squirming, unsure whether they were watching a show or something far more real. Clint leaned in again. "The saddest part? You used to have potential. You used to care about being good at this. But you chose to be mean instead of meaningful. That's not my generation's failure, it's yours." Kimmel, sweating and stammering, tried to smooth things over. "Why don't we just pretend it didn't happen?" Eastwood snapped. "Smile and shake hands like everything's fine? That fake nonsense is the real problem." He stepped closer, now looming over the desk. Kimmel instinctively backed away. "Here's the truth, Jimmy. Consequences don't care about your ratings. They don't care about your excuses. And after a career spent tearing people down, it was only a matter of time before someone stood up. Tonight, that's me." Eastwood straightened his jacket and turned to the camera. "I came here to talk about my work, maybe make you smile. Instead, I was met with the kind of disrespect people mistake for entertainment now, and I won't be part of it." He turned back to Kimmel one last time. "You could learn something from the old westerns. In those stories, the good guys stood for something. They built communities. They had character. You might want to try it sometime." And with that, Clint Eastwood walked off stage, leaving Jimmy Kimmel alone, shaken, exposed, and without a punchline. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or remain in stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling, but there was nothing left to capture except the fallout of a reckoning long overdue. That's what happens when a Hollywood legend calls out a late-night host on his own turf. Was Clint right, or did he go too far? Tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.